High above the clouds, a son searching for answers and a mother lost in silence begin a journey neither expected. A single moment at 30,000 feet sparks a ripple that will change the course of their lives, reminding them both that healing can come from the most unexpected places. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The Blacktown car slid to a halt at the curbside drop-off. Through the tinted windows, Jeremiah Reed caught sight of the sprawling glass and steel of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Travelers streamed in and out of the terminal, dragging luggage, calling loved ones, rushing to gates with that restless energy unique to airports. Beside him, his mother sat in perfect stillness. Alexis Reed had always carried herself like royalty without needing a crown. Even now, dressed in a tailored cream suit and a scarf tied neatly at her throat, she looked composed, dignified. But Jeremiah knew what the world couldn't see. The stillness wasn't grace. It was absence. 6 months had passed since his father's death. 6 long months of dinners eaten in silence, of empty mornings where his mother once sang along to gospel records, of her smile, warm and generous, folded away as if she no longer remembered how to wear it. "Ma," Jeremiah said softly, watching her hands. They were folded in her lap, fingers interlocked, the way she always held them in church. "We can call this off. I'll have the pilot ready the jet and—" "No," Alexis cut him off gently. Her voice was quiet but firm. "We don't need your jet. Commercial's fine. Besides, you've already cleared your calendar for me. You made the effort. The least I can do is sit on a plane." Her eyes never left the window, as though she were looking for something out there, far beyond the terminal doors. Jeremiah studied her profile, the delicate curve of her cheek, the stubborn strength in her jawline. To the world, he was the billionaire visionary, the man who turned an idea in a dorm room into an empire. But right here, right now, he was just her son, helpless in the one place where money, brilliance, and power meant nothing. The driver opened the door, and cool morning air rushed in. Jeremiah stepped out first, then offered his hand. Alexis took it without a word, letting him guide her carefully onto the sidewalk. Travelers bustled around them, rolling bags clattering across the pavement, flight announcements echoing from overhead speakers. The world moved on, loud and hurried, but mother and son walked at their own quiet pace. Inside the terminal, heads turned. Some recognized him. He caught the flickers of double takes, the subtle whispers. Jeremiah Reed. Billionaire. Innovator. There he goes. He ignored it, as he always did. His empire meant little to him here. All that mattered was keeping pace with his mother, steadying her steps when she hesitated. At the check-in line, she stood silent while he handled the details. At security, she removed her shoes carefully, as though each motion demanded thought. By the time they reached gate B19, Jeremiah's chest ached. His mother had always been vibrant, quick-witted, commanding in her own way. Now it was as if she were fading, inch by inch, and he was powerless to stop it. On board, the flight attendant guided them to their first-class seats. Jeremiah helped Alexis settle by the window, placing her carry-on in the overhead compartment before taking the aisle seat beside her. She smoothed her skirt, folded her hands, and sat upright with a distant politeness that hurt him more than if she'd wept. Jeremiah leaned back, exhaling heavily. He'd faced aggressive investors, courtroom battles, the weight of thousands of employees depending on him, and none of it had ever made him feel this small. He glanced at her again, at the proud woman who had once told him he could build anything he dreamed. He had built it all, and yet here he was, unable to give her the one thing she'd lost. Her smile. The steady hum of the engines filled the cabin as the plane began its slow taxi. Jeremiah adjusted his seatbelt, stealing a glance at his mother. Alexis stared out the oval window, her reflection faint in the glass, her expression unreadable. He wished she would talk. About anything, the weather, the food, even how much she disliked flying. Silence stretched between them, thick and unyielding, and he felt the familiar helplessness press in. Then she appeared. The flight attendant moved gracefully down the aisle, checking on passengers with a practiced ease. She was tall, with skin the color of warm bronze and a smile that seemed to come easily, not forced the way most people wore them at work. Her name tag read Janelle Carter. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reed, Ms. Reed," she greeted warmly, her voice lilting musical. Jeremiah looked up, expecting the polite tone he always received in public spaces, measured, respectful, slightly awed by his reputation. But her eyes went straight to Alexis, as though Jeremiah weren't even there. "Is this your first time flying with us?" Janelle asked Alexis, crouching slightly to be at her level. Alexis blinked, surprised at being addressed so directly. "Not exactly. It's been a while." "Well, welcome back," Janelle said softly. "And don't worry, I promise we've upgraded our pretzels since the old days." She winked, conspiratorial. A small sound escaped Alexis. A huff barely audible. But then, Jeremiah's breath caught, her lips twitched. A smile, faint but unmistakable, curved across her face. It was the first smile he'd seen in months. Janelle seemed to sense the weight of the moment, but treated it with a light hand, as if she hadn't just performed a miracle. She glanced at Jeremiah, her expression briefly acknowledging his startled look, then turned her attention back to Alexis. "If you need anything at all, just push that little button up there," Janelle said, pointing to the panel above. "Even if it's just to complain about how terrible the in-flight movie is." Alexis's smile lingered another second, then softened back into her usual quietness. But Jeremiah had seen it. He had proof that his mother's joy wasn't gone forever, just hidden, waiting to be coaxed out. Janelle stood, smoothing her navy uniform. "I'll be back to check on you both after takeoff," she said, and moved down the aisle. Jeremiah leaned back in his seat, his pulse still quick. He glanced at Alexis, who was again watching the clouds outside, but something was different. Her shoulders had eased. Her face seemed lighter. He turned his eyes to the aisle, following the graceful figure of the woman who had managed, in less than a minute, what he could not accomplish with months of effort. And for the first time in a very long time, Jeremiah felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The plane leveled off at 30,000 feet. A soft chime signaled that seatbelts could be unfastened, and passengers stirred, stretching and reaching for magazines or headsets. Jeremiah didn't move. He sat still, staring at the seat back in front of him, trying to process what had just happened. His mother, his grieving, silent, unreachable mother, had smiled. Not for him, not for family, not for a therapist. For a stranger. For Janelle Carter, the woman with the easy laugh and warm eyes. It unsettled him. He had built his empire on control. Code bent to his vision. Companies rose from his strategies. Entire markets shifted when he entered the room. He was accustomed to being the force that moved the pieces, the one people turned to for solutions. Yet here he was powerless. Watching someone else draw light out of his mother with nothing more than a few kind words and a joke about pretzels. Jeremiah leaned slightly, stealing a glance at Alexis. She was quiet again, but her posture had changed. Her shoulders were looser, her hands unclasped. The faintest trace of that smile lingered at the corner of her mouth, like a ghost refusing to leave. Hope and jealousy mingled uneasily in his chest. He didn't want to resent Janelle. He should be grateful. But something about it gnawed at him. Why hadn't he been able to reach his mother? Why did it take a stranger at 30,000 feet? As if sensing his gaze, Alexis turned to him. "You're staring," she said gently. He blinked, caught off guard. "Just thinking." "Mm." She studied him a moment, then returned her gaze to the clouds beyond the window. "She's kind, that young lady." Jeremiah nodded, though the word felt insufficient. "Kind. Yes. But it was more than that." Janelle had looked at his mother and seen her. Not the grief, not the silence, but the person beneath it. It was something Jeremiah, with all his resources and intentions, had failed to do. The cart rattled down the aisle a while later. Janelle reappeared, offering drinks and snacks with the same warmth she had shown earlier. When she reached their row, her smile was effortless. "Sparkling water for you, Mr. Reed?" she asked politely, then shifted her gaze to Alexis. "And for you, Ms. Reed?" Alexis hesitated, then surprised them both. "Do you have ginger ale?" Janelle's smile widened. "Best choice on the menu." She handed over a small can and a cup filled with ice. "I always say it tastes better in the air." This time Alexis chuckled, an actual laugh, low and brief but undeniably real. Jeremiah's chest tightened, his throat catching. When Janelle moved on, he exhaled slowly. He felt something stirring in him, a realization pressing at the edges of his mind. Power didn't lie in empire, or money, or the sharpness of his mind. Power was here, in the ability to touch another life, to ease a burden, to make someone laugh when they had forgotten how. And the fact that Janelle Carter had done what he could not left him both shaken and deeply curious. For the first time in years, Jeremiah Reed found himself wanting to know someone not for what they could do for him, but simply for who they were. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft golden glow as the flight cruised above the clouds. Some passengers pulled blankets over their laps, others tapped at tablets or dozed off. The hum of the engines became a kind of steady lullaby. Jeremiah, however, was wide awake. He'd been turning over the same thought for the last hour. How to speak to the woman who had reached his mother in ways he could not. He wasn't used to hesitation. In business, he spoke, people listened. In life, doors opened, and introductions flowed effortlessly. But here, at 30,000 feet, the simple act of asking a question felt oddly daunting. When Janelle passed by again, he made his move. "Excuse me," he said quietly, careful not to sound commanding. She paused, adjusting the neat scarf tied at her neck. "Yes, Mr. Reed?" He gestured toward his mother, who was sipping ginger ale, content for the first time in months. "I just wanted to thank you. For earlier." Her brow furrowed slightly, as though she didn't understand. "For making her laugh," Jeremiah clarified. His voice came out lower than intended, rough with sincerity. A slow smile spread across Janelle's face, soft and genuine. "Sometimes all it takes is seeing people where they are," she said. "Grief has a way of making folks feel invisible." Her words struck him harder than he expected. Invisible. That was exactly it. His mother had been living in a shadow unseen, even by him. "She hasn't smiled like that in a long time," Jeremiah admitted, his gaze flickering to Alexis. "I've tried everything. And you." He stopped himself, not wanting to sound desperate. Janelle tilted her head slightly, studying him with eyes that seemed to see past the sharp suits, the reputation, the wealth. "Maybe it's not about trying everything," she said gently. "Sometimes it's just about being there. No solutions. No grand gestures. Just presence." The simplicity of it disarmed him. Presence. He had been so busy offering his mother the world, when all she had needed was someone to sit beside her in the quiet. "Thank you," he said again, more firmly this time. Janelle gave a small nod, then glanced down the aisle where another passenger was waving for assistance. "You're welcome, Mr. Reed. And for what it's worth, she's lucky to have you looking out for her." With that, she moved on, her steps unhurried but purposeful. Jeremiah leaned back in his seat, heart unsettled. Her words echoed in his mind, cutting through layers of pride and guilt. He had been trying to fix his mother's grief with the only tools he knew: money, schedules, control. Janelle had reminded him that love didn't always require solutions. Sometimes it only required presence. For the first time since his father's passing, Jeremiah wondered if maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to his mother. And though he wouldn't admit it aloud, he found himself hoping he'd cross paths with Janelle Carter again long after the plane touched down. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Jeremiah set his briefcase down by the door and loosened his tie, listening to the stillness. The Reed estate sprawled across acres of manicured lawn and stone pathways, but to him, it had felt smaller these past few months. Hollow, like a stage set after the actors had left. He walked through the wide foyer, past framed photographs of family vacations, graduations, birthdays. In every picture, his father's presence loomed. Tall, confident, with the same sharp eyes Jeremiah had inherited. Alexis had always been beside him in those photos, radiant, laughing, her hand resting on her husband's arm as though it belonged there. Now the laughter was gone. Jeremiah found his mother in the sunroom, sitting in her favorite armchair. A book lay open on her lap, though she wasn't reading. She was gazing out at the garden where her husband had once spent hours tending roses. "Hey, Ma," Jeremiah said gently. She looked up, blinking as though surfacing from a faraway place. "Jeremiah, you're home early. Board meeting wrapped sooner than I expected." He hesitated, then added, "How was your day?" To his surprise, she smiled faintly. "Peaceful. I had the ginger tea Janelle suggested. It helped." Jeremiah stilled at the name. She hadn't spoken about anyone, friends, neighbors, not even church folks, in months. And now, a flight attendant's small kindness lingered enough for Alexis to remember. He pulled up a chair across from her. "I noticed you've been lighter. Since the flight." Her gaze softened, drifting back toward the garden. "She reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That it's okay to laugh, even when your heart aches," Alexis said, her voice steady but tender. "Your father had that gift. He never let a day go by without making me smile. When he died, I thought maybe I didn't have the right to smile anymore." The words hit Jeremiah hard. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, throat tightening. "I tried to be strong for you," he admitted quietly. "I thought if I worked harder, built more, filled the house with everything you could ever want, it might ease the pain. But none of it worked." Alexis reached across the table, resting her hand over his. Her touch was warm, steady. "Baby, I never needed you to fix it. I just needed you here." Her words carried the same truth Janelle had spoken 30,000 feet in the air. Presence. Simple, quiet, human presence. Jeremiah sat there, unable to speak, caught between regret and relief. For years, he had drowned his life in deals and deadlines, believing that achievement was love. But in that moment, sitting across from his mother, he realized how much of himself he had hidden away behind boardroom walls. He thought of his father then, the man who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to tie a tie, how to pray when he didn't know what else to do. His father hadn't built empires. He had built a home. And Jeremiah, for all his success, had nearly forgotten what that meant. A silence settled between them, but it was different now. Not heavy, not suffocating. Just quiet. Shared. Jeremiah squeezed his mother's hand, and for the first time in months, he felt something like hope flicker in the stillness of their home. The following week, Jeremiah found himself restless. Work, usually his anchor, felt strangely hollow. Numbers filled spreadsheets, deals demanded signatures, but his thoughts drifted elsewhere. To the sound of his mother's soft laugh. To the woman who had drawn it out like it was the easiest thing in the world. Janelle Carter. He told himself he wasn't chasing her. That would be unlike him. Jeremiah Reed didn't chase. He orchestrated. He planned. He made the world come to him. And yet, on his desk, the boarding pass from that flight sat tucked inside his planner. A quiet reminder of 30,000 feet of clarity. 2 days later, on a rare afternoon with no meetings, Jeremiah surprised his driver with an unusual request. "Take me to the airport." The driver raised an eyebrow but didn't question. Jeremiah rarely explained himself. Inside the terminal, he wandered past polished floors and bustling crowds, an outsider in his own city. His security team had cleared a path, but he waved them off, choosing to walk alone. He told himself he was there for business, scouting opportunities, considering investments in aviation tech. But deep down, he knew. He wanted to see her again. As fate, or something like it, would have it, he did. Janelle emerged from a staff-only door, her uniform crisp, her rolling case trailing behind her. She looked different here, off-duty between flights, but the same warmth followed her like a quiet aura. She laughed at something another attendant said, her head tipping back, her smile unguarded. Jeremiah froze, struck by how ordinary the moment was, and how extraordinary she made it seem. He approached before he could overthink. "Ms. Carter." Janelle turned, surprise flickering across her face, quickly replaced by recognition. "Mr. Reed," she said, straightening instinctively, as though bracing for formality. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," Jeremiah replied, then realized how odd that sounded in an airport. He cleared his throat, adjusting his cufflinks out of habit. "I wanted to thank you again. What you did for my mother, it mattered." Janelle softened, but her smile was modest. "It was just a conversation. Anyone could have done it." "No," Jeremiah said firmly. "Not anyone." There was a pause. Travelers rushed around them. Announcements crackled over speakers. But in that small pocket of space, the air stilled. Janelle studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to read the man behind the billion-dollar reputation. "Well," she said, her tone light, "if you're hanging around airports just to say thank you, Mr. Reed, I'd call that above and beyond." Something in her voice teased, unafraid. It caught him off guard. Most people bent their words to please him, but Janelle spoke as though she owed him nothing. And strangely, he liked it. "I'd like to see you again," he said before he could stop himself. Her brows rose. "See me?" Jeremiah nodded, feeling a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, nervousness. "Dinner, maybe. On your schedule, of course." For a moment, she simply looked at him, weighing the request. He braced for a polite refusal. But then she smiled, slow, careful, with a hint of amusement. "I don't usually take dinner invitations from passengers," she said. "But maybe I'll think about it." And just like that, she wheeled her case toward her gate, leaving Jeremiah standing amid the noise of the terminal, more intrigued than ever. Her world was so far from his, yet in that moment he felt the distance begin to shrink. The clink of silverware echoed softly in the Reed dining room. Dinner had always been a grand affair in this house. Polished mahogany table, crystal glasses, candlelight glowing against walls lined with art. But tonight it felt more intimate. Jeremiah and Alexis sat across from one another, 2 plates between them, the air heavy with unspoken words. Alexis had been watching him all evening. He could feel her gaze even when she was quiet. He cut into his salmon, trying to act casual, but the weight of her eyes was unrelenting. Finally, she set down her fork. "You've been distracted lately." Jeremiah glanced up. "Work's been busy." She arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. "It's not work. You've handled busier months without flinching." He looked at her then, really looked. His mother's strength was back, not fully, not the way it had been before grief hollowed her out, but enough for her to see through him. He had spent his career facing down CEOs and senators, yet under her gaze, he felt 12 years old again. "You met someone," Alexis said simply. Jeremiah froze, his glass halfway to his lips. Don't bother denying it," she interrupted gently. "I saw the way you've been carrying yourself. The way your mind drifts even while you're here. It's written all over you." He set the glass down, exhaling. There was no point pretending. "Her name is Janelle. She's a flight attendant." The corner of Alexis's mouth twitched, as if she were holding back a smile. "Ah, the one who made me laugh." Jeremiah nodded. Silence stretched between them, but not a cold silence. Alexis folded her hands, her expression thoughtful. "She gave me back something I thought I'd lost," she said softly. Don't toy with that, Jeremiah. If you pursue her, don't do it out of guilt, or because she reached me when you couldn't. Do it because you see her." Her words landed heavy, deeper than he expected. "Ma, it's not like that," Jeremiah said quietly. But even as he spoke, doubt needled at him. Why was he drawn to Janelle? Was it gratitude? Curiosity? Or something more he hadn't let himself admit? Alexis leaned forward, her voice steady. "She reminded me how to live again. And if she's reminding you too, then you need to decide what you want. Don't hide behind excuses. Don't hide behind your empire." Jeremiah stared at his plate, appetite gone. He felt stripped bare. His mother had always known how to cut through him with truth. But tonight, the words pierced deeper than any boardroom battle. After a long silence, Alexis reached across the table, her hand covering his. "I don't want you lonely, Jeremiah. Not like I was these last months. But don't you dare mistake fascination for love." Jeremiah swallowed hard, the weight of her touch grounding him. In that moment, he understood. This wasn't just about Janelle. It was about who he was willing to become. The man who built walls with money, or the man who tore them down for love. The airport buzzed with its usual symphony of noise. Rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, hurried footsteps. But for Jeremiah Reed, it felt strangely calm. He walked beside his mother, Alexis, who moved with a steadier step than she had in months. She wore a soft lavender dress, her scarf tucked neatly at her collar, and though her face bore the marks of grief that had not fully left, her eyes held light again. "Remind me," she said, her tone teasing, "why the billionaire is dragging his mother onto another commercial flight instead of that fancy jet of his." Jeremiah smiled. "Because sometimes, Ma, it's not about getting there faster. It's about the journey." She chuckled, the sound soft but genuine, and slipped her arm into his. At the gate, the boarding process had just begun. Jeremiah's gaze lifted, scanning the attendants at the podium. And then he saw her. Janelle Carter stood in uniform, greeting passengers with that same effortless warmth he remembered. When her eyes landed on him, surprise flickered across her face, then softened into a smile, steady, calm, but edged with something more personal this time. "Mr. Reed," she said as they approached, her voice carrying just enough to be heard over the noise. "Ms. Reed, back with us again." Alexis returned her smile, brighter now, freer. "Seems like your airline has its hooks in us," she said. Janelle's laugh rang lightly, and Jeremiah found himself watching the way it lit up her face. For a brief moment, the chaos of the terminal faded. Later, once they were settled on the plane, Jeremiah leaned toward his mother. "You were right," he admitted quietly. "About what?" Alexis asked, adjusting her seatbelt. "That if I was going to pursue her, it couldn't be about gratitude or distraction. It had to be about truth." His voice lowered. "And the truth is, I don't think I've wanted something this real in a long time." Alexis reached over, giving his hand a squeeze. Her eyes glistened, but her smile, full, unguarded, said more than words. As the plane began to taxi, Janelle moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and offering reassurances. When she paused at their row, her gaze lingered a fraction longer on Jeremiah. No promises, no declarations, just the quiet acknowledgement of two people whose paths had crossed at exactly the right time. The engines roared, lifting them into the sky. Jeremiah looked out the window, the clouds parting into endless horizon. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like numbers and deals. It looked like possibility. And beside him, with Alexis laughing softly at some small comment from Janelle, Jeremiah realized the rarest kind of wealth wasn't built in towers or measured in billions. It was here, in presence, in love, in the fragile, beautiful gift of a smile.